I had a pathological obsession with doing it my way. Although I could implement systems and teach people to the end of the earth, they're not me. So I'm not going to say it with my mouth and my words. And that would bother me. I can let that go a little bit and realize that the business doesn't slip. Like the way that they're saying it is going to make the exact same impact as the way that I'm saying it. And we're still aligned with the ultimate goal.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Ryan Snaadt. It rhymes a lot, and you're listening and watching the Rhymes with Odd podcast. Today, we're sitting down with another amazing guest. We got Joey Glenn in the house from EP, or Engineer Performance. Joey, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here.
Joey and I have been connected for about a year now or so. Client of mine, but also it's been fun to go on multiple shoots and see all the stuff you guys do at EP. So really excited to sit down and talk, physical therapy, wellness, and helping coach the youth to the next level with you.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad to be here. It's been great working with you over the last year. I'm really excited to be on this show. It sounds like a lot of upcoming aspiring entrepreneurs are listening, and I'm stoked to kind of share what I've been through with them.
Sure. No, really pumped about it. So I guess the first thing is if you can kind of introduce yourself. If you were in an Uber with a chatty driver that's really curious about who you are.
My nightmare.
Yeah, right. A lot of people are like, I'm on my phone, leave me alone. What if you introduce yourself to someone, like who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Joey Glenn. It's kind of become my identity, right? I own Engineer Performance. Well, I did. We do a lot of sports performance training and sports rehab. So my passion is really working with athletes, trying to fill some gaps that I felt personally as a young athlete when I was in high school, and just trying to create a whole team of people around those athletes, trying to give them whatever they need in their specific moment and trying to just get them to the next level, whatever that might be for them, helping them achieve their goals. So ran Engineer Performance and I've done quite a bit since, but that's my elevator pitch.
Sure. That's great. Well, and you have a unique backstory because you're a doctor of chiropractic. Correct. That's your education.
Yep.
But you also lead a team of PTs and people that have advanced degrees and connections with surgeons and all the stuff like that. Did you ever think you would be here when you first started your journey into learning about the modalities of like human health?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it is interesting, especially being in Iowa where chiropractic was founded actually here in Davenport, Iowa. So the fact that I'm a chiropractor, but seem to get along, I guess would be the best word, with physical therapists for the most part, and then ended up hiring them and working more in the orthopedic setting is a little bit weird in Iowa for sure. But it was always the goal. I mean, honestly, the only reason I went to chiropractic school was at the time, physical therapists didn't have direct access. So in order to see a PT, you had to see a doctor first and get a script. And that really wasn't doable for my business model or what I wanted to do in the future. So I went chiropractic route and it ended up being a great thing for me. I ended up loving the profession, especially the school that I was at and the direction I took things. So this was kind of always the goal. I feel very lucky. Even in my own family, there's a lot of people that I know that just kind of wandered through college trying to find their path. I feel very fortunate that I really did have a pretty clear vision of what I wanted when I was pretty young. Sure.
And it's such a blessing that way because I think it's always the journey is part of is the destination for a lot of people, but you learn things along the way. But if you get into an industry that you really like, you can just kind of hang out and learn and evolve and build your connections and do whatever you want to do. So it's always fun to see.
Yeah, it's so true. I do feel fortunate that I figured that out when I was young. So I was able to make those connections and those networks like kind of just seamlessly as I was going through my education because it was just so clear to me on what I wanted to do. So I feel very fortunate on that aspect.
Sure. Well, I think we'll definitely get to current day of what you guys do and who you serve, but I think it'd be helpful for people to hear kind of the backstory. So where'd you grow up? What was your childhood like? And how did you end up to where you are now?
Yeah, great question. So I actually grew up in Johnston, Iowa. Here in town, I was, a very stereotypical Iowa kid. I was a wrestler and went through my own issues, honestly. So I was a tiny kid. I always tell people I weighed 84 pounds as a freshman in high school, which is mind-boggling. Yeah. So
were you like an inmate at a concentration camp or something?
I honestly looked like it, especially, and I loved wrestling, right? And the lowest weight class at the time was 103. Freestyle during the summer was 98. So I love freestyle because at least those kids were a little closer to me. And so I was a tiny person. And now I've got, twins that my 8-year-old twin weighs 62 pounds now. And just like, I can't imagine how that was. Yeah, I was a tiny human.
You could have been wrestling an 8-year-old when you're...
Exactly. And so, I went through that and all the all the pain that comes with that, with the fact that I loved a sport that was kind of like hand-to-hand combat, and I was at such a disadvantage. And so I went through all these like stages of trying to figure out how to remedy that. Like my parents didn't really know. They supported me as much as they could. My strength coach at the high school was just grossly misinformed. I just feel like I didn't have like the support or the knowledge base to try to help get me to the next level. So I was figuring things out on my own, right? So I was taking like protein shakes to school and mixing them with my carton of milk and trying to figure that out. And then I was lifting at the school, but then would also do some extra stuff outside of the school that it was just old school. This was a while ago, and there just wasn't things like there was now. This was before, even before like the CrossFit boom or any of that was a thing. So it was just sports performance training was kind of non-existent.
What was your first go-to? Was it like Arnold's Bodybuilding Encyclopedia or something like that? There was like no resources back then.
It's funny you mentioned that because yes, I owned that. I had a bunch of just like, all the resources then were very much bodybuilding. It was bodybuilding splits. Nothing was like training for sport. Mm-hmm. Again, my passion, my love was wrestling. I wanted to be a better wrestler. I didn't really care about what I looked like. So none of that it didn't jive with my goals. And that was just obvious to me. But what was not obvious was what to do.
Sure.
So that was frustrating. Eventually ended up going through a growth spurt, thank God, and became a decent sized human being where I could actually wrestle and compete and had a blast. But then again, I learned on the other side where my senior year, I ended up tearing my labrum in my shoulder and that ended things for me. And then I went through this whole cycle of I went to physical therapy, which was a very mill-based physical therapy where I was doing PT next to, a 50-year-old working a desk job that just didn't have the same goals as me, but we seemed to be doing the same exercises. And once again, I knew enough to know that this isn't it, but didn't know enough of what to do. And so that kind of frustrated me, but at the same time, it just inspired this thing inside of me where there has to be better. So like I said, I learned from an early age what I did want to do. And it was pretty much at that point. It was my senior year. I knew that I wanted to help people kind of bridge that gap. Kids that were in my position, either they're just undersized or just didn't know what to do to improve their performance on something that they loved and then get back to something that they loved. When it got taken away from me, and for all intents and purposes at the time, wrestling was kind of my identity, that shook me. I didn't know what to do. And I wanted to be the answer to people that were coming after me and try to find those answers and then make it readily available to people thereafter. So
sure. That's really cool. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people I know that get into PT had an experience as a child and they're like, I either love my physical therapist and want to do it too, or in your case, like lackluster experience. Yeah. Like I gotta be part of this change here, so that's big.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned that because even in chiropractic school, when I ended up going to chiro school, it was more, it was Palmer West in San Jose, California. It was more sports med oriented and it was the same thing. I remember the very first day of our class, we went around and said how you got into this and where your passion came from. And it was all that, right? I went to physical therapy or I went to a chiropractor and had this amazing experience. And I felt like the odd man out. I was like, I went to PT and had a miserable experience and I just think there needs to be something better. There is a better answer.
Sure. So you graduated at Johnston. Did you go to college for wrestling or were you done senior year?
Yeah, good question. No, I was finished. So that injury really ended things for me. And again, PT was lackluster and I returned a lot faster than I should have. I came back 3 months later, just wasn't feeling like I was getting any better inside a PT office and retore it there 3 months later. And so that was kind of the end of things for me. But again, although it ended one passion of mine, it definitely sparked the next one. So graduated there and then I went to the University of Iowa and that was always the plan, to be honest. I was going to stay in state and grew up a Hawkeye fan. So I ended up going to Iowa and majoring in exercise science. It just kind of fell in place. Again, I kind of went to my advisor at the very beginning and just said, this is my experience. This is what I'm passionate about. You tell me what to do. And I just kind of followed the lead there.
Sure. So you go to Iowa, you're kind of going through the classes. What were some of the hardest things about college for you? And what were some of the easiest or the best things about college?
Yeah, I'd say, the hard thing was focusing. At the very beginning, my freshman and sophomore year, I was there to have fun, to be honest. And I was taking all my prerequisite classes that I wasn't super interested in. It didn't keep my attention. It just wasn't for me at the beginning. Although I was having a lot of fun, had a bunch of friends and had a great time. And it wasn't until I met my wife and she's way smarter than me. And I realized if I wanted to be around her, I got to go to the library. So started hanging out with her, going to the library, studying a lot more. I tell people a lot at that time is when I learned how to study. And that made school easier. And then I started getting into the classes that I was actually interested in. Like now I'm actually taking biology and anatomy and kinesiology. And that just sparked this whole thing in me where school became much easier. It was just more on autopilot. So finished out school, graduated there, and then immediately went out to California. And that's an interesting story too, because I went straight from there to an internship in California and just got right into the industry.
Sure. So you're going to California. Was that just chasing this pursuit, or did you always kind of want to move to Cali a little bit?
Yeah. So I did. I always wanted to go to California. I don't know why. I always had this thing where the coast just kind of, it was just very attractive to me. I wanted to be by the ocean. And so for no better reason. And I remember telling my mom and dad that. My mom was very against me moving to California. And I remember having a conversation with her, just if I go there for school, I can imagine myself coming home, but if I don't like scratch this itch now, I imagine I finish school and then I'm probably going to leave and then settle down. And so that kind of helped persuade things and then led me that direction. So it was always the goal, but it also became pretty clear. So to go back to your previous question, when I was in school at Iowa, I remember taking an exercise science class, and they were teaching those same bodybuilding splits that we had mentioned earlier. And it was just, again, I just felt like this isn't it. I don't know what it is, but this isn't it. This is what I'm trying to study. I'm trying to study movement for athleticism, and this is not what we're learning. What happened was my dad, who just always seems to be on the forefront of everything, he actually ended up sending me a book. It was called Core Performance by Mark Verstegen.
Okay.
I remember reading that and just thinking, oh, this is so refreshing. They were talking about like just movement for the sake of movement and to be better at movement or be better at athletic skills, as opposed to just improving like aesthetics or a muscle mass or something like that. And it just clicked for me. So it's interesting because I read that book, and being a young, naive guy, I called the author owned a facility out in California. And so I called them and just asked, can I be around you guys? I just want to spend some time, about to graduate here. How do I do that? And it was funny because the woman who answered the phone, her name was Jules. She's a phenomenal person, but I remember her telling me like, yeah, for sure. We'd love to have you out. We have 3 internship spots over the summer. We have almost 300 people that have applied. And so I was like, I'm never going to get that. But I just started annoying her, I think, more than anything. I just pestered them more than anything, more than anybody else, I think, and just constantly checking in, just really, really wanted it, to the point that they gave it to me for no other reason than I was annoying them. And that's ended up being what I did right after I graduated.
Sure. I think it's a lost art, is just the art of being a pest, because especially now with digital job applications or whatever, it's like if you can make an impact or stand out in some way, that's huge.
For sure. I think the only way I could stand out in front of them was to see my name every day.
Sure.
Because nothing else on my resume stood out.
God, he's calling again.
Exactly. Let's at least get him to stop by just showing up.
Sure. So you pack your bags. You had to, was it San Jose, California?
So that's where I went to school, but actually the internship was in Santa Monica. So I moved to LA, and that's fun too, because I graduated on, that Saturday, and I started working on Monday in LA. So my dad and I actually flew out to California. I went to work right away, and then he went to work trying to find me a place to live. And California, that's difficult. So, I remember going to work. I came back like 9 hours later, and my dad's in the same spot in the hotel, but just drenched in sweat, just searching the internet, can't figure out a place, like just stressing out. I felt terrible for him, but it worked out. I ended up staying in a room that somebody had, very luckily, and it all worked out from there.
Perfect. Yeah, and I know it's always interesting. I talked to someone who interned at Hurley, the surfing brand that is owned by Nike now. And they were telling me that they were out there for 4 months in LA. And I think she said she had to walk in like 3 miles in heels on the side of the road. And that was like really close, like 3 miles away, but can't have a car, all the different stuff that goes with it. It's a challenge. So
yeah, I was in the same boat. I didn't have a car. I was taking public transport everywhere. Just they had something called the Big Blue Bus. I took that everywhere. I was just telling a story this morning when I was training some high school kids that my first client in the morning at that job was a professional cyclist. And one day he needed to train earlier than normal. So I woke up it was about 2 hours earlier. I think it was like 4:30 or something. I was waiting by the bus stop trying to get to work on time. And that bus was not showing up. It was taking forever. I didn't know what was going on. I finally look it up and it didn't start running until like 6. So I had to run to work. It was exactly 2 miles and I'm just in a dead sprint, trying to get there on time, not look bad. I'm an intern. And I remember getting there, I'm drenched in sweat, out of breath. And we start training. And the guy I was working with, he's like, what happened? I tell him the story and he's like, dude, I have bikes. Like, I'll let you borrow a bike for the summer. So
Sure.
that worked out great. So I ended up riding his bike all summer and that was my transportation everywhere.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's nice that somebody has
He was the man.
a conscience there.
Yeah.
And I'm curious now, like I always hear the horror stories of, not the horror stories, but the people in LA are not like the salt of the earth that there is in the Midwest. What was your experience living there and being an Iowa boy and then going to LA? Were people snobs or what was it like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I worked the entire time I was living in LA. Like I didn't know anybody out there other than my new roommate and he was a trip. So I'd spend weekends kind of hanging out with him as much as I could, but I just picked up every shift they possibly had. Anything that showed up, I took. I was trying to make a really good impression and I also envied this company like you can't believe. And so anytime they had an opportunity to work, I took it. So I worked the entire time I was there. Again, like I said, I was more than willing to like stock Gatorade and fold towels. And I just wanted to be around these coaches. And that's what worked out for me because while I'd be folding towels, a coach would be working with a pro and I could overhear things. And then they noticed that I was willing just to do whatever. And then they'd start to give me like little tidbits of information in between sessions. And that ended up being, honestly, after all the education I went through, I'd say those in between segments of different sessions, those like 10, 20 minutes, ended up being the stuff I use 90% of the time in my day to day.
Sure. So you're doing more of like, it'd be like personal training than it wasn't so much chiropractic because you weren't a chiropractor yet, right?
Yeah, no, it was on the radar knowing that I wanted to help people like that, but it wasn't something that I had a real good plan for or a real good path. So I was just trying to learn from these guys at the time. And the way that came up was it was personal training for like certain pros that we had like cyclists and basketball players. But then there was also small group training for like a whole teams. Like we had a couple soccer teams that would come in. And so it was a lot of different experiences. But what I noticed was obviously after working with all those people is if somebody was dealing with an injury, I had no idea what to do. I didn't even know how to regress the exercises that were planned for that day. And then if it was a step further and the person couldn't work out and they had to see a physical therapist, where I was at a place called Athletes Performance. It's now called Exos. But where I was, they had a physical therapist on staff that would pop in and this dude just blew my mind. He was brilliant. Like every time that would happen, I would try again just to get as close as I could and overhear things. And this guy just seemed to be like a mad scientist to me. Like he would just tease out things that I think, to me, I was like, he has x-ray vision. This is amazing. And then I'd watch them get better and then back into training with me. And that reignited this passion for the healthcare side too, the rehab side. I knew that at that point, like as much as I'm loving the strength and conditioning stuff, I'm missing this piece.
Sure. So you're in California, you're figuring out this, like the PT side's kind of interesting to you. What's kind of the next step that gets you to consider doing chiropractic school?
Yeah. So then I started looking into exactly that, like physical therapy, chiropractic, and I found Palmer West. Unfortunately, it actually just closed down. Their last class just graduated, so it's not around anymore. But at the time, they had a really big and successful sports council is what they called it. So I always say chiropractic is very funny because it's like a choose your own adventure type of thing. Like you go and you take classes and they'll prepare you to pass boards. And so essentially you learn how to do differential diagnosis. You learn when somebody's in serious need and needs to get out of your office and it needs help. But after that, it's kind of you choose what you want to do, which is why if you walk into one chiropractor, you can get a totally different treatment than if you walk into one next door and they've got the same degree. And so my adventure that I chose was very much sports med oriented. And then again, being in California was very advantageous for that because there was just massive sporting events going on all the time. And Palmer, the sports council, had contracts set up so that we could go and provide like the medical assistant or be the med tent for each of these events. So it just got me a lot of experience with that stuff. So that's kind of why I went that direction.
Sure. Well, how long did you do chiropractic school? Is it like a 3-year program or is it longer?
So it's 3.5 years, but it's year round. So it's like a 5-year program, then they just smash it together. But yeah, and it's very much like board oriented. And then the end of it, you're working inside of a clinic and essentially just running your own clinic for a little while. So again, got to learn exactly what I wanted to do. And then it transfers, then you do like a preceptorship, which is kind of like rounds in med school. And so I got a couple just amazing opportunities. I feel like I got very, very lucky. My first one, I was working at the VA hospital in Martinez, California. And to be honest with you, it's where I found out what I don't want to do, right? I was seeing like 30 people a day, which I can't have that big of an impact. I'm not giving drugs, right? So I'm doing stuff with my hands and then showing you exercises, and then it's on you, and I hope you do them. And we were seeing so many people that I could only see you again maybe 3 months later. And if somebody needed to see me once, it's at least a 6-9 month wait. And it just wasn't for me because people weren't going to get better.
Sure.
So that was frustrating, but I was working under a guy named Dr. Ed LaCara at the time. And he was, again, one of those people that are just brilliant to me. I just spent as much time around him as possible and just tried to absorb whatever he was putting out. And then my next preceptorship was at Water and Sport Physical Therapy in San Diego. And once again, they were working with professional athletes. So they were working with the Chargers, the Padres, some of the Dodgers, a bunch of like professional athletes that were always around. And it reinvigorated that passion for me. Like, oh, this is what I felt like I was missing back in Iowa. Not just because they were pro athletes, but because they're pro athletes, they have a team of people around them that will do whatever it takes for that athlete. And they've got people in each one of these scopes for that person. And it just filled me up.
Was there I guess, what was the biggest names of people that you either saw or were treating while you were there?
Yeah. So there was a little bit interesting because we'd have a lot of people like the off season. So I'd say like the biggest name that I got to meet was Drew Brees at the time, which was cool. But back even before that, I was training bigger names when I was at Athletes Performance. Like Kevin Love, worked with him for a long time,
nice.
which I thought was really cool. And then some celebrities. I got to work with Michael Keaton for some time, which was
really
awesome. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. You know, the funny story about him is he would always wear glasses and like this Louis Vuitton hat. He thought that would like make him look less conspicuous, but nobody works out with stuff like that. So I thought everybody was staring at us more than anything. But yeah, we got to work with some huge names, which was awesome. But also at the same time, again, like what really filled me up was just like, there is absolute professionals. And in my understanding, like absolute experts in every one of these fields that are just willing to do whatever it takes for these people.
Sure. Was there, not to say starstruckness, but is it weirder treating someone that's like famous? Because you're like, there's more pressure of like, if I screw this up, then my work is going to be known. Like who screwed up Michael Keaton or Kevin Love or somebody.
There definitely would be. But I think more than that, what I brought from that was just like, what makes these people special is just their work ethic. Like it's hard to mess somebody up like that. They know what they're doing and they're really, really good because that's what got them there. And a lot of times it's just who they are. That's what I always say about Kevin Love specifically. He is a monster. He'd come in and work as hard as he possibly could, do whatever I asked him to do every single time. His mindset was just perfect. His work ethic was perfect. He deserves everything he got. There's other athletes I worked with that I won't name their names, but are just on the other end of that spectrum where they got there because they're really good at basketball and they just want to play ball. I remember this one guy specifically, he'd always tell me that, like, I would have to just drag him to do the next exercise. And he'd always be like, Joey, I just want ball. Like, I get it, man. But your coach makes you be here, like, do this exercise for me. And that's kind of what, that added to like my understanding of exactly who I want to work with and what I want to do, because that wasn't for me. I don't want to drag anybody that doesn't want it. Those people are going to make it because they have it, period. Sure. Nobody's going to change anything. But there's other people that I want to be behind because they are who I like to be around.
Well, and it's interesting that even at that level, there's still people that don't get it. Yeah. Like what you're doing will allow you to play ball longer, better, faster, for better longevity and make you more money and all the stuff. It's like, you just have to do this to get there.
Exactly.
But I don't enjoy this. It's like, oh man, how did you even get to where you are at that high of a level? You know, because you got to do a bunch of shit you don't want to do when you're reaching a professional level of any athletic sport. So.
Exactly. And it did make me a better coach, because as much as I don't want to drag somebody, it made me more creative. Like for that person specifically, like the way to get him motivated was to compete. He loved to compete. He liked to play ball. So every lift we did, every exercise we did, it'd be a race, or it'd be, we'd have to compete somehow because that's what got him involved.
Sure.
And it made me a better coach on the long end. And I think eventually a better clinician, because again, everybody's different. I know what I get excited about, but people just respond to different cues or different language, different communication styles. And I think that that helped me like kind of fine tune that a little bit.
Well, and you mentioned the tried and true chiropractic style of like crack them and get them out in 5 minutes. And you're seeing, like you said, 30 people and just immediately boom, 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 boom. What do you think, where do you think the industry's shifting from that? Because that's really the tried and true way to make the most money, maybe not the most impact or
Yeah.
fix the most people's health issues.
Yeah.
What's been kind of your experience with that?
It's quite a conundrum for me too. When I was young and starting a business and needed more money, and knowing in my mind that like that volume way to practice could have gotten me there a lot faster, but staying true to my ethics and morals and the passion, like the vision the entire time. I find that's a repeated thing in my career is if I have a really clear vision of where I want to go, just make sure that that's still the goal. Keep the goal, and then do whatever I have to do to serve that goal seems to be the right thing, and it comes out on top. I would say when I was finishing chiropractic school, I was very excited about the future of the profession because especially in California, chiropractors and physical therapists just seem to work together so seamlessly. It almost, you never even knew who was which because we just had a team of people that were doing what they needed to do for the patient or the athlete in front of us. And then the group of students that were coming out after me were just awesome. They were great clinicians, great communicators, good strength coaches in a lot of cases. And I was very, very excited about it. To be honest, then when I moved back to Iowa, it was a little bit disheartening because it did seem like that there was a division there between like the rehab clinicians, like physical therapists and chiropractors. They didn't seem to be seeing eye to eye on a lot of things. That was frustrating for me. And now with Palmer West closing down, I haven't really stayed up to date on a lot of the other schools, so I don't exactly know where it's going now. I could say like right after me, I was excited. Right now, I don't know. We'll see where it goes. I think we're in a weird limbo stage.
Well, and I know just from my experience in shooting content for all these different practitioners in the metro, like Chris Reel at
awesome.
Elite Health and Performance, and then like Kaizen and all those different guys there, like.
Kyler Case, Metro.
Yep, Kyler Case.
Awesome,
yep, I also had him on the podcast as well. Like, I would say anybody that's under the age of 35 or younger understands hybrid treatment and leverages that because it helps people more, and it's a bigger value add. Where I feel like people that are 40 plus years old that have been running their practice for 20 years are the crack 'em, get it out quickly type of thing. It's kind of a wild thing too, because like my wife goes to a chiropractor that's like 35 minutes away from where we live, but she understands like pre and post birth. Like that's kind of her specialty. So Paige just had 2 kids, so she likes going there. But it's also like her appointment is 8 minutes, maybe 8 minutes.
Yeah.
You're driving 45, like an hour round trip just to go for 5 minutes. I'm like, it's one of those things though, like it depends on the structure of your business, but I would think hybrid would be more beneficial, but it's a higher probably priced service because you're getting way more value and more time and all the things that come with it. So
a lot of times it is more expensive if they're paying out of pocket. Through insurance though, you can bill just like you could a physical therapist. And so it's a give and take. Again, if I keep the vision, the goal, and the goal was always just to do whatever was best for the athlete. And what I feel truly is best for the athlete is not that quick adjustment and then get out the door. The vast majority of the time, I don't even adjust people. I use it as a mobility tool on T-spines for the most part. But I think the power is in autonomy in the person, the patient, trying to help them understand what might be going wrong or what they can be doing to better optimize whatever their goals are. Just help support their goals and then give them the tools to do that on their own. It's kind of counterintuitive, but like my biggest compliment is essentially being fired. Like they don't need me anymore. And I think that is the goal. And again, that always ends up being what's best for my business in the long run. In the short term, for sure not. I can see a lot more volume and see 90 people in a day and make more money today. But if I see 8 to 10 people today and I make all 8 to 10 of them a lot better and a lot more like happy and more autonomous, reaching their goals, I feel like I've done a lot better service for the community in general, and it'll always come back to my business.
Sure. Well, it's the same thing with like the medical industry, right? Do you fix someone, or if you're in the pharmacy drug business, it's like, do we actually give them medication that will solve the problem or keep trailing them along so they can be a customer for life? It's like, it's very hard to divide capitalism from making a bigger difference. But like you said, if you fix someone's illness or ailment, I would go and sing praises to the world. Like, hey, Joey and his crew fixed my back or my leg or whatever. Go work with them, But as we'll talk about with your current setup now, you've got ways for return to play and all the different gamut to keep people involved in your business, not just if they're hurt or sick, So
exactly.
So you're doing your internships, you're getting all this great experience. Did you work as a chiropractor out of school somewhere? Or did you just jump straight into starting your own thing?
Yeah, I mean, I jumped into it. So after I was kind of along the same philosophy of just like finding people I wanted to be like Mark, and following them around. I did the same thing on the chiropractic side. I mentioned Dr. LaCara at the VA hospital. I knew that I wanted to be this guy. Like I started following him around at every opportunity I could, helping out his clinic. I remember getting in his car and it was just cluttered with research papers and thinking that was the coolest thing in the world, right? I followed him around like a puppy because he was brilliant. He was doing things right. And I wanted to be like him. So I did that. Same thing on the PT side. I started working at Water and Sport Physical Therapy. I was working with somebody named Dr. Jen Rayner at the time. I believe her name now is Marcelo, but she's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And so I followed her around too much. So I feel like I just gained all this clinical experience. I felt like I was really confident in my ability to help athletes get to the next level. So then I just wanted to come home and start that. At the time, I was offered an opportunity to take over the practice, one of the practices in Southern California, and was very intrigued, almost pulled the trigger on that. But we started having kids. My wife got pregnant and we really wanted to be closer to family, closer to home. And again, my ultimate vision was to help the athletes in the Midwest that just didn't have the opportunities that I felt like I didn't have when I was in high school. So it did make sense to move home. So when we moved home, we went all in. I don't think that's the best advice ever. I was given that advice from a mentor of mine who I remember right before I opened, I called him and he said, "Joey, are you scared shitless?" And I was like, "Yes." And he goes, "Good, then you went big enough." And I was like, okay. I don't know if that's the best advice in the world because I would have done things a little bit differently if I started again. But
what was that like? I mean, in terms of going all in, was that like mortgaging your house, selling everything you had to get, like, what was that process like to get a physical location?
Quite literally all in. Yeah. So I went to, it's funny. I went to all these different banks. I created a business plan. My wife helped tremendously on that. She was a business major as well, or at the time. And so she went and spent a ton of time while I was in chiro school creating this incredible business plan of exactly what we wanted to do. So we moved back to Iowa, and I remember we went to all of these meetings with banks. And several of them knew who my parents were, and they're entrepreneurs too, and they're pretty successful at this point. And I would always start the meetings with, or before we'd even schedule the meetings, my parents have nothing to do with this. I need you guys to understand that. And we'd still take the meeting. We'd go to the meeting. We'd pitch this business plan. And every time it ended with, "Great business plan. People don't do these anymore. And I think this will be successful. So if your parents would do this and sign on this, then..." And so we'd end up walking away, unfortunately. So
they just thought your parents were going to bankroll it or co-sign it, or
co-sign and cover for me if things went south. I wasn't willing to take that risk, and I really didn't want that hanging over me.
Changes the dynamic of your relationship with your family.
It absolutely does. I don't think it's a good idea. And so we got just incredibly lucky. We ended up getting connected with somebody who's essentially just an angel investor, somebody that had some money that wanted to help young upcoming entrepreneurs. And we pitched the same thing to him. I remember we met at a restaurant in Ankeny. It's no longer there. It was called Chips at the time.
Okay.
We met there, pitched it to him, and unlike all the banks, it ended, we finished dinner, and he was like, "All right, when do we start?" And he was ready to go. So he built the building for us and really bankrolled the very beginning of it. And that was incredibly helpful for us. And it allowed us like a foot to stand on and get us started. My parents did end up helping a little bit with like an initial loan to start, just cover some of our bases right out of the gate, which was incredibly helpful. But again, it wasn't like anything hanging over our heads anymore. It was really like, this is what you need to get started. Now go get them. And that was incredibly helpful. We got off to the races right away with our building we're still in today.
That's really cool. I think that's the piece that a lot of people get stuck on is like they have the vision, but how do you materialize it or how do you bring it to the forefront? Because with your investor that came in, was it just a percentage stake, or did they, like you said, do kind of a loan situation where they just front the money and they expect interest back, or were they just a silent partner and like, I don't want anything to do with this, but here's the money and I expect my money by a certain time back? Like, what was that like for you?
Yeah, no, it was just a little bit of interest every month on the loan essentially that he gave us to start to build the building. He even went a step further where he actually signed a contract where it was like a lease to own situation where eventually when we were in a position to buy the building, we could buy it pretty much at cost of what it took to put it up. So incredible person that really put himself out there for us. And it ended up paying off for all of us, which was, thank God.
That's awesome. And I think it's interesting too, because when you build a physical location, depending on your lease structure, if you're going somewhere, like you want to typically stay there, especially if it's a good spot, which it is. It's right in the main heart of everything. So I think that's really cool that there's an opportunity there because they could, your lease could be coming up and then like, just kidding, we sold it to someone else and now you have to like find a new place to go or whatever. So
yeah, it'd been devastating. Yeah, absolutely. So that was always the vision. Like eventually we knew we wanted to own the real estate, understanding that it's kind of like a longer term retirement plan. So the fact that he was willing to do that without really even pushing was incredibly helpful.
Sure. Because you guys have been in that building for 8 years, you said?
Yeah, it was a little bit longer than that now. Almost 10,
almost 10.
15. Yeah.
Very cool. So do you guys own the building now? Or are you still, okay. See, like things can really come together for you.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So you launch it. The buildings, I mean, you guys have many rooms in there. There's a gym in the back. Was it literally just you being now we're going to go in this room to feel like it's a different thing? Like what was that like?
Kind of, man. It really was an all-encompassing venture at first. So it was my wife and I. Hannah did massage therapy as well. So we had some massage therapy rooms where she was doing that. We had a couple like treatment rooms, basically chiropractic and rehab. And then the back was the gym space. And so when we started, it was us two, and I hired a strength and conditioning coach to help me. And so what we would do, the way we structured it is I would coach in the morning, a few classes, then I would treat in the afternoon, and our coach would come in and coach afternoon classes. And then other than that, we ran all of it. And so it was, a big empty building. And we were very lucky that a lot of the community kind of bought in pretty quickly to what we were doing and really did help fill us up. But at the beginning, it was just all day, every day type of thing.
Sure. Because you started with just you, and then your wife, is she a massage therapist, or was she just filling in to make up for the empty rooms?
No, she was an awesome sports massage therapist, like really, really good. I feel like, the world is missing out that she's not any longer, because she was tremendous, but really good business mind. And she was also doing all of our accounting, all of our books. But I remember the last massage she did was she got pregnant with twins, and she had to take a break in the middle of the massage to throw up because she was getting sick. And I was like, yeah, it might be the end of that. And
sure.
Luckily at that point, we'd also hired another physical therapist. We were starting to get into a position where she could step away from that. And then we did bring in a massage therapist to kind of replace what she was doing on that end. So it started to grow a bit more organically. But from there, no, she took a step back and hasn't done massage in quite some time.
Sure. So you guys get your first location, you're off the ground, you're running. What was the vision for the business? Like the business plan you were pitching then versus what it is now 10 years later? Is it the same vision? And what is that at this point?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would love to go back to that original business plan and see what has changed. I think the biggest thing that's changed, I was just young and naive and assuming that, the old mantra, like if you build it, they'll come. Like that's not true. Like it took a lot of groundwork. And so I was assuming that we'd be just full. I was assuming that insurance companies are a little bit more ethical than they actually are. So I think I was naive. I think the overarching vision though remains the same. It always was. It was always do what's best for the athlete. And although that's changed, what is, I think, best for the athlete has changed over the years. That goals still remain the same, which I think makes things like consistently easy to follow.
Sure. So in terms of offerings and audience, it sounds like you were really leaning into athletes in the beginning. Was it just like local high school and college athletes? Was it adults, or was it anyone and everyone?
Yeah. So, I mean, the athletes were definitely my niche. They're definitely the people I felt most comfortable with. And again, talking about what I said earlier, where I felt comfortable with people that wanted to be there, wanted to be better, and I didn't have to drag them along. I mean, to be honest with you, more than anything, I feel like I'm holding the reins back on people, asking them not to do anymore. And those are the people that light me up. So that's where I was excited. But to get us started, we really had to start with our adult fitness population more than anything. Again, my parents, they employed a lot of people, and it made it very easy then they were offering as part of their benefits really to pay a portion of any of their employees for a gym membership essentially. And that helped get us off the ground for sure. And it gave us a boost there. But again, it just wasn't like our primary thing. And a lot of the people that found their way into us via that route were more interested in like weight loss, things like that, which really isn't our thing. Our thing is more performance. Again, even back to when I was struggling as a high school student, like instead of body comp or aesthetics, it was more what can I get out of my body? And that's definitely the philosophy we maintain with our adult fitness group. So that kind of weeded itself out to being a core group of adults that have the same philosophy and are interested in kind of getting the most out of their body outside of the gym.
Sure.
So instead of like trying to set a PR in the gym, they'd rather try to go do an obstacle race and place in it or something like that. So that kind of weeded itself out. And then it definitely became more of a stronghold with the athletic population. I was pretty naive. When I first moved back, I thought, wow, I've got all this experience with professional athletes. And I think that's going to ring so true with all these high school athletes. And that's not the case. There's these egos, unfortunately, in a lot of high schools, especially in high school weight rooms. I find it really strange, but they feel like, these are my athletes, or I think that's crazy because to attach your ego to a high school athlete is just really confusing to me, especially again, our philosophy is just what can we do to help support them in reaching their goals. So that was really frustrating for me. And what happened was we started to get just some of the really high end kids, and the fact that they were already high end, I feel like they were looking for that extra edge and they found us. Those kids came in and started training, and God forbid they get hurt. And then we help rehab them back to a high level. And then they end up playing at a high level, D1 basketball players and baseball players, et cetera. And, then younger kids start to look up to them. So even though there's a little bit of a stone wall at the school, they started seeing what they were doing. These other kids were talking highly about us, and that just kind of started to grow organically. And I've always found that like that organic swell just seems to be like the right people. They're getting them the right message and actually believing in our philosophy and our goals. And then they're the ones that seem to do the best.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Cause I know when I was in high school, it's like coach didn't even want to share with like, you're a multi-sport athlete. Like, no, you're my wrestler, my basketball player, my football player. It's like, no, I want to help the other team, but then to your point, it's the injury prevention and all that stuff too that goes to it. But I also had friends in high school that had 4 surgeries before they were seniors in high school and they only played one sport. So
it is a trusting game. Again, just like chiropractic is like one door versus the next door could be totally different. It's the same in strength and conditioning, especially in like personal training world. Like a certification is so incredibly easy to get. You can get it online. One of my friends from California, he got his dog certified as a personal trainer. Literally his name's Spot. He's got a certification that says Spot as a certified personal trainer. And it was to prove a point. It was that this literally means nothing. You need to look into this a little bit further because there's a gold standard cert, but even that just doesn't mean a whole lot to me anymore. You just need to be aware of what you're getting.
Sure. A piece that I want to touch on before we go to the next thing was you'd mentioned like your parents having this business and that type of thing. Did you ever think you would pursue like starting your own business from your childhood, or what was kind of that influence on you?
Yeah, good question because it was huge. They weren't always entrepreneurs. I tell the story a lot. I grew up, we didn't have much, and I watched my parents struggle, but work tirelessly. Their work ethic was just something to be super admired to me. My mom was always kind of running the show at different organizations that she was at. And my dad just had a work ethic that was mind blowing. I remember in the morning, he'd wake up and he'd deliver newspapers. Then he'd go to his 9 to 5 at a bank. And then at night, he'd go clean commercial buildings. And I would help him every now and then. But I remember just watching him like, this man doesn't sleep, I felt like, but doing whatever the hell it takes for the family and whatever it takes to get there. I also remember him talking about how miserable he was at his day-to-day job. And it just wasn't something he enjoyed. I remember he used to say the only day he'll show up on time or early to his day-to-day job was the day he's going to quit. And he just didn't like it. But then I saw a complete switch. When they decided to start their own business, I saw this excitement kind of filled our house. I remember them writing down on grid paper, like what the building would look like, exactly, the remnants of a business plan. And that excited me. And that work ethic translated into what they were doing. And they poured themselves into this business that slowly I got to witness. I was in high school when they first started it, and I got to witness it become successful. And, to this day, they still run it and they're incredibly involved. And so seeing that really did light something in me where it takes work. Like that work ethic is something to be admired and something to be emulated. But at the same time, doing it on your own is exciting and something that I wanted to do too.
Sure. Because what kind of business is it?
It's a childcare center.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they have multiple locations or
they
just
do,
one?
Yeah, they own Generation X childcare center and preschool. So they've got 5 locations right now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And they're still in the Johnston area, or are they all over?
They're all over. Johnston, West Des Moines, Urbandale, Ankeny, and Bond area.
Oh, cool. Very cool. Yeah. And I think it's just interesting because I know some people that don't come by entrepreneurship through their family, it's like even harder because it's like you'd ask your parents, hey, what do you think about me taking out this huge chunk of money and signing my soul to the devil to get this thing on the built up the ground. And somebody that's only ever had a 9-to-5 job is going to be like, don't do that. You're crazy. Do what everyone else does. Do what I did, whatever. But I think it helps to have people that you can at least lean on and know, like you said, if there's people that are like, are you scared? Well, that's probably a good thing,
Yeah. I always call my mom my yes man. I mean, I could have the dumbest idea. I'll call my mom. She's like, yeah, do that. It's just, she excites me and gets me really excited for those types of things. I feel like she has she creates like a fake sense of security net. Like, just take the jump. You'll be all right. But it's always been like really something I've needed in the moment. I tell a story quite often about like early entrepreneurship. When I first started the business, like things weren't always good. Like a lot of times they got really, really tough. And I'll never forget one, and I've told this story on a podcast before, but I'll never forget one time where I went to her office. One of their Ankeny Center is actually right behind our location at Engineer Performance. And so I remember went over to her office and was just kind of sitting with her and just felt like I was going to break down. Like, I don't know what to do. I was kind of spewing all these different problems at her. And I'll never forget, she said, hey, lift your head up. And I looked at her and she's like, I don't know the answers to any of that, but I know you do. So go do it. And that's kind of the kick in the ass I needed at the moment to be like, yeah, you're right. Like, what am I doing here? Like, just go work until this works out. And that was incredibly helpful. And she's always been that for me, just like a constant positive influence, potentially sometimes to a detriment, but also just a good reminder of just like work ethic. And I feel like anybody could do anything as long as they just keep at it, stay consistent.
I think it's really cool you have people like that in your life, because when you hit those inevitable lows, if there's no one in your corner, it's really easy to just throw it in. Like,
for sure.
I bit off way too much that I can chew. Time to sell it. Time to, commit to say I'm bankrupt and like just close it down. Like, having those people in your corner is super powerful. So
yeah, years later, I had a physical therapist come to me he actually wasn't a physical therapist, but he started a physical therapy clinic as a franchise, and it was struggling about a year in. And I remember he came to my office and did the same thing. He was crying, and I told him the same thing. Like, the answers to these things. You just got to go do it. Unfortunately, that person wasn't willing to do it. He knew what to do, he just wasn't willing to do it. So he went right ahead and closed it down. And again, like, that's the right answer for some people, because the amount of work it takes, as you know, as a business owner, especially in the early days, is tremendous. And you have to go into it with your eyes wide open. But if you're willing to do it, I think there's always a path.
Do you think entrepreneurship is a learned trait or skill, or is it something that's like baked into like the type of person you are? Because I think, to your point, it's the make or break moments really show where they're at. Like, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure. I feel like my experience from seeing my parents on both ends of it really kind of just created that as who I am. Like, that's part of who I am. I feel like, where it's just, that's something I want to emulate. That's the lifestyle I want to live. And I don't think that would have been possible otherwise. And so it made like the work, to a detriment that we'll talk about later. Like, it became my identity. Like, working became my identity. Trying to achieve some level of success or try to achieve this goal that I had set out to achieve became everything that mattered to me for a while. And I think, I took that too far eventually. But I think part of that has to be who you are, because there's days that are miserable.
Sure.
I remember one time getting a call because we had a water leak at the building, and I was there at like 1 a.m. trying to fix a water pipe outside, and I'm not a handy person. And so I remember doing this thinking, I don't know if I signed up for that, but at the same time, like, you did. You're like, only being in a place like this, like, you have to be kind of everything. You got to wear all hats. And I don't think everybody's willing to do that. But if you go into it with your eyes wide open, knowing that like that's real, that's what you're going to be doing, then I think it's a lot easier to swallow when it does come up.
Sure. I would say my opinion on it is more like, there's different types of entrepreneurs, but I think if the why or the purpose of what you're doing is so close to your core of why you're on this earth, then you'll do anything, I love that. Because I think, to your point, it's like, you might not be the best savvy business person or handyman or good with numbers or sales or whatever, but you have this driving passion for what you're trying to do. And then that gives you the reason to do it. Because I think that's a big piece that I've learned just from talking with everyone, is like, as long as you have that reason that you started or a reason that you're going, then you can keep going. But if you don't, if you're just doing a money grab, like, oh, I heard a laundromat was a good business and you have zero interest in that. And then you're out there at 3 a.m. fixing vending machines that are broken or coins are exploding. There's soap everywhere.
Miserable.
You're like, this sucks. Like, yeah, it might make money, but I'm not interested in this at all. So I think you just have to find that passion. I think that'll, from what I've heard, like that leads people to the right conclusion there.
I think that's such a good point. And maybe that's why it was easy for me to stay consistent. It was because I had those painful experiences as a high school athlete and understanding that like, yeah, the goal is to alleviate that from the next person. And that meant enough to me that it didn't bother me to be working all the time. I always say like work, it wasn't work. It was just what I had to do.
Sure. No, I love it. We'll take a pause. We'll do the lightning round here and then we'll kind of jump back into your story. Random questions, have not told you what they are.
Yeah.
You have not been briefed. So this will be fun. How do you feel about trivia? Are you like a trivia nut or do you?
No. In fact, like it's a known thing that I'm terrible at trivia.
Okay.
So this will be interesting.
Well, I've got 5 or 6 questions here. If you get half them right, I'll be very impressed.
Me too.
We'll start with a random one out of left field. Can you name 10 U.S. presidents? There's over 50 of them.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a second here.
Let's go with the easy ones, right?
Okay.
Let's go with Washington, Jefferson, and then 2 Bushes. Obama, Trump, Lincoln.
Who's the current president?
Give me a Biden.
I'll give you the shoe in.
Why
I don't even know. I haven't looked at the news for 4 years.
Assume Trump was. I need one more. Let's give me one more.
You got 8. You can give me a couple.
I'm at 9.
You need 2 more.
I had 2 Bushes. You count 2 Bushes?
I counted 2 Bushes.
All right, let's go 2 more. I've got one of my best friends is a history teacher. He's going to be very disappointed in this. Let's do.
Who's the only president from Iowa?
I didn't know there was a president.
Only
from
one.
Iowa. Who is it?
It's Herbert Hoover.
I had no idea.
I'm not. He's known as one of the worst presidents because he was the president during the Great Depression. So
that's unfortunate.
I've been to his home before. I've seen the bedpan he crapped in as a child. It's in.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's in eastern Iowa. So
Nixon.
Okay.
You reminded me of that one.
Yep.
Ronald Reagan.
There you go.
There we go.
We got 10. That's 10.
But I had no idea Hoover's from Iowa. That's interesting.
Yeah. They used to all the lean-tos in New York City because everyone was like homeless, sat on their ass. They had little like tarps lean-to. They called them Hoovervilles, like little towns. Everyone hated Herbert Hoover. He's like the worst president in history.
That's a great reputation for the guy from Iowa.
Yeah. And then I always remember Taft. Because the only thing I remember is the fat dude that got stuck in a bathtub.
Yeah. That's the old man. What a bad thing to be known for. That's too bad.
Could you imagine? Like you're president for 4 years. You do all this work.
That's what you got.
I got stuck in a bathtub, and now it's all people know me for. It's like God. So
that's too bad.
Anyway, it's random ones, but thought we'd get you warmed up here. Big sports fan.
I like sports. Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure a lot of your clientele are too. So you probably learn a lot.
Yeah.
Michael Jordan, known as one of the best, if not the best, basketball player in history. How many NBA championships did he have?
Did he have 5?
Final answer?
Yeah.
6. There was a stint in the 90s, 91, 2, and 3. He had 3 in back-to-back. Like the dynasty of the Bulls was kind of nuts then. And then he decided to be a Chicago White Sox and
that was an interesting move.
Be Bo Jackson.
That was an interesting move. I wish that didn't happen.
Sure.
I also wasn't really old enough to really enjoy that for what it was at the time. I wish I was.
Sure.
Because that would have been amazing.
Sure. Well, I'm watching I love sports documentaries. I've been watching a lot of them lately, and one of them's the White Sox or the Red Sox and the Yankees rivalry, why that is. And I'm watching these back, and they're showing the whole lineup, and I know the entire starting lineup from like the mid 2000s. I know who the Red Sox had, like their batting lineup, their RBIs. Like I was in that world for so long, and then
awesome.
I couldn't even tell you like 5 active players on an MLB roster right now. I couldn't even tell you.
Man.
I just don't watch anymore. So
I always tell people the season's too long. I can't pay attention. I start every year with like good intentions. I'm going to watch this year, and then it just falls apart.
Sure.
I'm a fake Dodgers fan just because we were out there for a while. So this year was fun, but I literally only watched at the World Series.
Sure. Well, and it's kind of those like breakout, like you see like Caitlin Clark or Ohtani and all these other people, like these athletes that just draw a crowd to watch. I think that's cool to see. You kind of feel like a bandwagoner, but also like baseball's not the most enjoyable to watch because it's like other sports are so fast. So
exactly. It's funny. My dad always says about he's a bandwagon fan, a self-proclaimed bandwagon fan.
So he likes the Patriots, the Yankees.
Whoever's good that year, period. Like, and his answer, it's always funny when people try and make fun of him for it because he's like, I like to watch a team win. So like, I'm going to do that every year.
Sure.
All right.
I just never thought I'd be in a place where I hadn't watched a single Hawkeyes men's game, but I'd watched every single women's game when Caitlin was a senior.
Oh yeah, dude. That was fun.
I was like buying the subscription, like where can I watch her play?
Absolutely. She's electric.
The whole team was. If you'd have told me that, 10 years ago, I'd been like, there's no way. Women's basketball, like, come on,
I know. I'm obsessed. They're awesome. The whole team was electric. They were so fun to watch.
Sure. So I'm excited for this coming season because a lot of these returners are coming, and then now it's a destination school.
Yeah.
People will come here for a spot to play, which is wild.
Jada Jimothy, she was one of our athletes, and she's like the hype girl now, if you've seen her. And she's so fun to watch. And she got in the other day and just made a sweet little Euro step. I thought it was the coolest. My living room exploded. I loved it. So it's fun to watch. I love that team.
Well, and especially now having a daughter, mine's only 10 months old, but like having these athletes that are crushing it and not just for sake of like, she's pretty good for a girl. It's like, no, like Caitlin's like, she's awesome. An amazing player, period. Like I only want to watch her play. And it's like, it's super fun. So, different sport now. We talked about winning dynasties in baseball. Who has the most World Series wins and appearances?
Team?
Yeah. Which team has the most World Series appearances and wins?
I got to imagine it's the Yankees.
Yep.
Yeah.
By a landslide.
Yeah. That feels like it couldn't be anybody else.
They have any stab at how many World Series appearances the Yankees have had in the history of their franchise?
How long has the franchise been around? How long has baseball been around?
Hundreds of years, I think now.
How long have they been doing the World Series? For that whole time?
At least 100 years, if not 200 years. Because baseball is like one of the first American sports ever. They're out there like, yeah, talking your transatlantic accent, see? Here's Clancy Jones. The man's an alcoholic. He's 50 years old. Like, and he swings and he just had a heart attack. He eats too much meat. Like that was the peak athletic male form.
You're too good at that.
Right.
You've practiced that.
Right.
I don't know. Let's guess 15
appearances.
Yeah.
Higher
than 20.
Higher
than 30.
Higher.
It can't be 50.
No. It's 41. They've been to the World Series 41 times
That's
as a franchise.
Insane. That is insane.
They've been there 41 times. Any stab at how many times they've actually won the World Series out of the 41 times?
Let's go half. Let's say 20.
Yep, 27. 27 wins. Yeah.
Dang. Yeah, that has to be by a landslide. Do you know who's next?
The next closest was the Cardinals. They have 11 wins.
Yeah.
And then tie for 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th was like Red Sox. They all 9 is the tie for 3rd place.
No one's ever going to catch that.
Yeah. The reason I think it is because they don't have salary caps like the NFL.
True.
So the Yankees are just a rich team and they can afford to pay top dollar for the best talent.
Yeah.
So I think that's a testament to good HR stuff. Like you want the best team, hire the best people.
Right.
But also, then there's teams like the A's and you talk about Billy Beane and all these other guys. They got to make lemons with rocks.
Yeah.
Lemonade.
I know.
Scrape some rocks together to get a good team together.
It is unfortunate, but I always am so curious how the money in baseball, like where that even comes from. But I guess that's why the season has to be so long too.
Right.
And I think that's decreasing viewership, just at least in my own experience. It's why I don't watch.
Well, and I think that compared to these higher injury, higher or lower shelf life players like NFL or MLB or something, like NBA player or MLB players can play for like 20 years.
For sure. A 10-year vet in the NFL that's insane.
Yeah, unless he's like a third string quarterback or a kicker or something like low contact. You can't be a offensive lineman having basically a car collision every 5 minutes. Like
I think John Wellborn had like a 10-year career on the line, which is just absolutely insane. Like I don't know how you could possibly do that.
Well, and we had Carter Schultz on a couple of weeks ago, and he's the GM for D1 Des Moines.
Oh yeah,
and he used to play for the Vikings and the Panthers and some other teams. Yeah. And he gave himself like 3 years to try to make a roster, some practice squads and stuff. And it's just nuts because just the toll it takes on your body.
Oh yeah, it's unbelievable.
And they're going like half speed in practice, let alone like full speed. It's just game on, it's kind of a wild. I
can't even imagine. No, it's very impressive.
Okay. This isn't really a trivia question. It's more of a opinion from you. You treat a lot of different athletes, different sports. What is an up and coming sport that's gaining popularity in Iowa that you're excited about, or that you've been kind of impressed with the interest from your student population?
Yeah, I'd say two of them, they kind of go hand in hand. Lacrosse and hockey, I think, are really exciting to me, mainly because like the proximity, especially for hockey, from us to some of the best places for hockey is we're so close to Minneapolis and St. Paul. And like there's so much talent that comes out of there, but for some reason in Iowa, it just hasn't trickled down. I think up to just recently, we just didn't have the space. There wasn't very much ice, and that was tough. I think it's really hard to compete with kids that are growing up on it. But now that's starting to improve. We're starting to get a lot more ice down here, and they're holding a lot more tournaments. I think that's going to improve significantly. I remember I loved hockey growing up. There's no way we could afford it. I think that's a huge barrier too. The pads are insanely expensive and registration, but I see it growing tremendously. And then it's sister sport, right? Lacrosse. When I was in California, I was working as an athletic trainer for different sports out there, and I do a lot of lacrosse tournaments, and it was incredible. The attention and the participation they got out there was nuts. The tournaments would be just absolutely massive. These kids are so talented and move like athletes. I thought it was really, really impressive. And now, I played lacrosse in Iowa when I was in 7th and 8th grade, and we were the only team. We had to travel up to Minnesota to play anybody, and we get spanked because we didn't have any way to play down here. And I see that finally growing here. I see there's a couple local sports, or a couple local teams, even in Ankeny, and that's exciting to me. I think It's a really cool sport up and coming.
Well, I think I have cousins that have boys that are down in St. Louis that are really big into hockey. They all go to 3 different schools that they have, mom has to take them everywhere to different tournaments and stuff, but they're all about it. The biggest, I would say, downside of hockey is the white man slang that has come out of that sport. The little 12-year-old
whole subculture.
Oh my gosh. I like basketball being a subculture. I think hockey trumps it because they're saying these weird Canadian phrases and
you're right.
I can't even spout off something because I'm I feel stupid by saying it.
You should. They sound stupid saying it, but it's a whole subculture in and of itself, which I just find fascinating. I think it's hilarious, but I'm excited to see more of it around here. I really hope it continues to grow.
Sure.
And then can I say pickleball?
I was going to say pickleball is growing faster than anything.
It's exploded. And talk about a rehab professional's dream, right? These people, we're seeing so many injuries from people that haven't played a sport in 30 years, jump on a pickleball court and think it's just glorified tennis or glorified ping pong. And then they end up tearing their Achilles or something crazy because they just haven't progressed themselves to that level of intensity, or just not even knowing that's that level of intensity.
Sure.
It gets pretty intense. There's a lot of injuries we're seeing out of that, which I think people need to be a little more mindful of, but it's an awesome sport and it's growing like crazy.
Sure. The two I would say is I think women's wrestling has been great, especially in Iowa, the amount of, I'm from Fort Madison, which is wrestling dynasty down there. And I never wrestled, I played basketball, but seeing the sisters of the coaches and the really high performing male athletes could crush anyone, but they didn't have an opportunity to do it in their own league. They'd have to, if you would wrestle with the dudes, half the time they wouldn't even wrestle you or whatever. So having their own league has been really cool to see. And just seeing the confidence building there, I think has been fun. And then men's volleyball, I think has been really cool too.
I didn't even know we had some men's volleyball.
Yep. They're doing club, but I think they're starting to put it into schools now.
Awesome.
Cause I see the men for the Olympics and it's again, so fun to watch. You see some of these guys, the 7-foot tall dudes get their vertical,
they can float
12 feet off the ground going, spike it down on someone in 100 mile an hour in the face. So
honestly, in California, again, they had, the high schools had men's volleyball teams and these guys could float. Their verticals had to be 40 inches. It was unbelievable. So I'm super stoked to hear that that's coming around because, we'll see some feats of athleticism with that for sure. And women's wrestling is incredible. Obviously I grew up a wrestler and the women had to wrestle with us and that it just wasn't ideal for anybody.
Sure.
And so to see them now have their own thing and really latch onto it has been incredible. The women's state tournament last year was unbelievable.
Sure.
Just this morning we were training in the Martinsdale St. Mary's High School, and the women's wrestling team that was working with us are animals. They are fun. They're in there getting after it. And I would be scared to wrestle these girls for sure.
Sure. Well, and there's not a lot of combat sports for women really. Yes, there's UFC and boxing or whatever, but you think of a lot of teenage kids have aggression. It's a good positive outlet. So you're not fighting at school or whatever. I know football season, I wasn't very stressed out very often because if I was carrying something, I just take it out on somebody in practice or at a game or something. So
100%. My house, we had a wrestling mat in my basement, and that was my mom's phrase all the time. Whenever my siblings and I or my friends would get in disagreement, she'd always just say, "Take it to the mat." So go downstairs.
We're going to solve this on the streets. Take it to the street.
You go wrestle for a little bit and get tired, and then it was done.
Sure, so sure. Love it. Last question here in the lightning round. You have twins, you said.
I do.
Do you know the statistical likelihood of having twins?
No.
Any
I can take a
guess?
guess.
Any guess?
I feel like it's more common than I would have previously thought, but I think that might just be because I'm aware of it now because I hear from all the different stories. But let's say 3%.
It's lower.
Is it less than 1%?
Yes.
Yep, I'm definitely biased just from all the people I hear.
Sure. I'll give you a break. It's 1 out of every 250 pregnancies.
Okay.
Natural pregnancies. Obviously, IVF, there's differences there with fertilization and stuff like that.
Yeah,
so.
I definitely feel like there's been, and again, maybe because I've been thrust into that world, a lot more fertility issues in the last few years that I've noticed, at least just in clinical practice. And then a lot more, multiples seem to come with that. But
sure. Is twins in your family?
No, we actually did have fertility issues, which led to that. So,
there you go.
So yeah, it was, I had eventually found out that we do have a set of twins somewhere down the line, but not a natural situation.
Sure. Well, I'm kind of a unique situation. So I have 3 sets of twins in my family.
Oh, wow.
But none of them are biologically connected to me.
Oh.
So my wife's sister had IVF.
Yeah.
So they have twins that are 6 years old. But they, again, science babies. So not that they don't count, but it's not a natural occurring one that would
count that towards the percentage. Yeah, I'd still send up a prayer.
Sure. Well, there's one there. And then my mom remarried to her husband now, and his oldest son has 5 kids, and 4 and 5 were twins.
Wow.
So that one, again, not blood connected to me through marriage there. And then my wife's cousin had a daughter, and then they just had identical twin boys a year ago.
Wow.
So again, not blood connected to me, but it's in my wife's family.
It's close enough. Yeah, 2 degrees of separation. I think you might be due.
Yeah, we have 2 kids now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if it's like just they're gonna sneeze and now the twins are in the bloodline, but
honestly, and going from 2 to 4 would be tough.
Yeah.
That'd be very tough.
So anyway, just thought you concluded your lightning round. You're out of the hot seat now.
Oh, let's go.
So we mentioned a little bit here the duty shift or the drive to chase perfection or achievement in the business when it started going. Walk me through kind of this. I don't want to call it an obsession, but you start this and then it starts becoming who you are. What was that process like, and what caused that to happen?
Yeah, I'd say it snuck up on me. Like I didn't even feel it happening. Again, I think there's a part of it or a percentage of it that's a good thing, where you have to be a little bit obsessed with the vision and what you're trying to do in order to make the work bearable. But you can take it too far. And I feel like I took it too far, where it was just easy for me to prioritize the job over almost everything else. And again, it just became this like obsessive drive I wouldn't say it was success. It was to try to meet that vision, like do whatever is best for the athlete. And if the athlete could have benefited from me answering this phone call during dinner time, I was answering the phone call. Or if the athlete could have benefited from they need to see me on a Saturday, then on a Saturday I'm coming in. And that eventually becomes toxic, right? Because priorities eventually shift a little bit, where there's a certain amount of it that you need in order to make the business successful. And the business had to be successful enough for my family to have a foundation. But thereafter, I also need to take care of everything else. And I feel like that was easy just to kind of take the back seat as I continuously got stuck in this rat race. Even after we found some level of success, we've started hiring other physical therapists. And I didn't necessarily need to be there. But once again, like if something came through where it would help the people that I was serving to do it, I would do it. And that was a really hard realization that came later. It came later when it was expressed by my wife. My family just straight up said, like, this is an issue, like working too much and noticing when I was working when I didn't necessarily need to keep, that foundation set. It was more of an obsessive compulsion to do more.
What were some of the warning signs or the kind of sticking points where you realized it was becoming a problem, or did it just sneak up on you and your wife's like, "Hey, Joe, you're at work too much"?
Yeah,
like, I am. Or did you have?
I forgot I slept there last night. Yeah. No, I would say the most obvious jarring thing for me was a specific, like pretty inconsequential phone call that I answered during dinner time with my family. Like my kids are sitting there telling me stories, and my wife's at dinner table, and I get a call that did not need to be answered. And I answered it, took it, And a lot of the people in this industry talk a lot. And it went on for a little too long. When I came back, I was eating dinner by myself. And that hit me pretty hard. Like this is, that was a mistake. And how long have I been making that mistake without realizing it? And that was a pretty consequential moment, I'd say, in my life.
Sure. No, I think you really, especially now, you really have to be intentional about where you're at when you're there. Like I always hear the saying, like, be where your feet are.
Yeah.
And it's so hard, especially if you're, live close to home or close to work and you just left. Like it's so hard for you to like put a pin in it and just go to the next thing. Cause that's like an employee mentality, the business owner mentality. It's going to follow you home.
Yes.
Cause my wife and I were very intentional when I first went and did that. And I feel like I have a really good handle on it now. And I have systems where I don't try to take stuff home, but now she's a year into her business. And then like last night we're like watching a movie with the kids before bed, kind of doing our rituals. And like, she's like looking up real estate stuff or replying to client emails. Cause it's like just on her mind. And I'm like, just wait an hour until they're in bed and then you can do it then. Like it's putting the discipline in place to do it. And it's very difficult to do. And like you said, it's when it's your baby, not your baby, but your business is your baby.
Yeah.
And it's your identity is tied to it where people expect certain things out of me. They're like, I don't want to be a bad business owner or not a good steward of people's time or effort. It's really hard to shut it off, I feel like.
100%. I think just being able to manage my time better became a huge solution to a lot of this, because if I would, let's say that phone call, for example, I'd see that the phone call is coming in. I wanted to answer it more than anything. If I didn't, it weighed on me. I would feel that the rest of the night, like I needed to get this, I need to take care of whatever was being asked of me at the time. And that weighing on me almost felt worse than missing dinner. And so that became a balancing act. But I would say like personal development is where my life kind of turned. And through personal development and time management is what started to solve a lot of those things, where like I can now take that weight and say, I have a time and a place where I'm going to fix that. That's not going to get like on the back burner. It's actually going to get addressed. That alone made me feel like a different person.
Sure.
And so I dove pretty heavy into that, like really heavy into personal development and just how I could be a better human, which again, not surprisingly is exactly like keeping my vision, the vision, where if I'm just consistently doing what's best for the athlete, it's best for the business. At this point, it's very clear to me that if I consistently do what's best for me as a human, it's usually best for the business too.
And you can't pour from an empty cup too. Like
Exactly.
It's not good for the athletes if you're strung out trying to be everything to everybody. You have no personal life. Your family's on the rocks. Like you don't want that, because then are you going to be a good treatment professional?
No.
You're going to be like grouchy and like, why'd you do your PT? And God dang it, like your leg's messed up,
Right. Yeah. And that comes out both in your family life and on the clinical side too, because I always say, I heard a mentor say this once and I wholeheartly believe this. He told me it's like you have a projector out of the back of your head, and whoever you're talking to, regardless of what's coming out of your mouth, they can see the reality behind you. And it's the vast majority of people will see that. And so what you're saying, you need to fully believe. And that I almost used it as a weapon for a while, where I felt like I was really good at compartmentalizing, where, I was showing up at a 5 a.m. Workout class to teach it, but I just had a horrible night of sleep, had all these other things going on. And I would just stop at the front door and like put that away, just completely put it away and put on this new face. I feel like that works for a short amount of time. And then they can see what's actually going on. Mm-hmm. And that's detrimental to the business, to me as a person, to my family. It just eventually really, really weighed on us. And obviously then you throw in like a pandemic, and that consumed my business life too, to the point where it's just something needs to change.
Mm-hmm. On the personal development side, what resources did you do? What work did you do on yourself to give yourself some grace that you could get past that? What were some of the things you were doing?
Yeah, great question. Therapy, number one. I'm a wholehearted believer in talking to people. I find experts, like, again, it's funny that a lot of people say, like, don't hire a personal trainer that doesn't have a personal trainer, or don't hire a coach that doesn't have a coach.
Or buy a suit from a dude in a ratty t-shirt and holy jeans.
Exactly. They got to believe in what they're selling. And I'm the same way, where like, if I think I can help somebody, then I feel like there's somebody that can help me. And so I went that route and took a couple different turns, but eventually found a therapy that really worked for me in terms of just working on myself as a human, as a better communicator, as a better listener. And it has trickled down into my business and everything else that I do. So I think diving into that spent more time just intentionally blocking out time and managing my time for work and managing my time for everything else that also matters to me that might have become smaller parts of my identity that I wanted to grow again. That really helped. And then obviously making business decisions that are aligned with those goals.
Sure. How big of it was putting the right people in place that you could feel confident that you don't have to do everything? Like the team will handle it if I'm at home, or you have a maintenance guy that, okay, there's a hole in the roof. Like he probably knows more than what I would do. Like or somebody to clean the toilet, whatever, like fill in the blank. What was that like for you to give you the freedom?
To be honest, I'm pathological with this stuff because I had the right people. I got so incredibly lucky from day one. I feel like I've only made a couple hires that weren't ideal in my business career. I've gotten so lucky to have attracted and then hired the people that can step in on day one or with minimal training, really take over, and I can trust them with my business. And I've felt that pretty quickly. So it never really was the issue because I could step away pretty much right away. As soon as I hired that first PT, so there's somebody there full time, I did feel confident that I could not be there and the business would run smoothly. I had a pathological obsession with doing it my way. And although I could implement systems and teach people to the end of the earth, they're not me. So I'm not going to say it with my mouth and my words. And that would bother me. And so I think getting to a point where I can let that go a little bit and realize that the business doesn't slip. Like the ways that they're saying it is going to make the exact same impact as the way that I'm saying it. And we're still aligned with the ultimate goal. And getting there was huge. So having the right people is everything. It just wasn't mine. It wasn't my problem. My problem was trusting myself to delegate it and let it go a little bit.
Sure. And I really connect with that too. Because like even today we have a shoot going on in Ames, but I had this podcast and some other stuff going on today that I didn't want to just shuffle. Because for me, it's like the scheduling was what was throwing me out of alignment, where I'm like, I have other shooters I've worked with that I can trust. And now it's come to the point where like, we're on the other side of like 30 or 40 projects with different contractors in the metro that I contract out for things where I don't know. I didn't even think about it. So you just mentioned this. I'm like, oh yeah, I have a shoot going on today. Like
That's awesome.
It's just, you can trust people. And I think that's a big piece of it where you've earned your time back. Cause it's like, where do I need to be right now?
Yes.
Where if your kid falls and slips and breaks their leg and you're in the ER and you're like more worried about like what's happening at work than like right now here where you're at, like that's when you're out of alignment. I think that's a hard thing to juggle.
Yeah. And I've seen people do it better than me. You know what I mean? Like I have people that are on my team that have taken situations that I couldn't handle in the moment for any other reason and do something, get a better outcome than I would have gotten on my own. And that built trust over time too. It again just made the importance of having the right people in the right place that much more obvious. But again, just like winning that trust from myself was super important.
Sure. So we talked about you were a clinician, practitioner early on.
Yeah.
What was the point when you shifted to business owner and stopped putting hands on people as much as you were doing the other stuff?
Yeah. I mean, you always hear people say like, you got to get to a point where you can work more on the business, not in the business. And it was just that's so true with my experience. What happened was I remember having several, weeks on end where my days were completely booked. Like my entire clinical day was booked with patients, and then I would coach classes until I had to go home. And it left me no time to do the things I had to do for the business that weren't getting done otherwise. And I remember going in the morning and starting to think about those things while I was treating somebody. And that bothered me a lot because, again, the goal was do what's best for them. What's best for them is not to be thinking about my accounting of that day. And that sat so heavy on my shoulders that I knew I had to make a change at that point. And that's when I started getting a lot more aggressive about let's try to systemize some things. And let's try to get more people in here that can actually do a lot of the work so that I can do the work on expanding and growing the business to ultimately meet more people and expand on our vision.
Sure. So you grow the business as far as it could go. You recently got acquired by Deos.
Yep.
Talk me through kind of the events leading up to that and ultimately the acquisition and what that whole process was like.
Yeah, it was quite a situation. So from the inception of the business, the ultimate goal was to be acquired by a larger company, either an orthopedic practice or a company like Exos. I thought that was going to be 20, 30 years down the road. So what I started doing was putting in place our system of just helping athletes in a way that they were not being helped otherwise in the metro. And part of that was really niching down specifically with ACLs. We do a really good job with ACLs with athletes who are trying to return to a high level of performance. And part of that work is you need to get a HUMAC test or an isokinetic test. And it's a machine that you need to do it. That's very expensive and it's completely out of the realm of possibility for me to have one in our clinic. So I started referring those patients to Deos. They had a machine. And so they were going there quite often. We'd get retests 3, 6, and 9 months. And so they come back and eventually leadership at Des Moines Orthopedic Surgeons reached out and said, what's going on? I guess our private practice, you're sending us a lot of people, they don't really refer outside a whole lot. What's happening here? And I explained to them what we're doing. And you guys have this machine. We like the data. We're working well together. And they asked if we could have a meeting. And so they came out, they saw the facility, the CEO and the president of the board, and one of the docs came out and saw the facility, talked to us and just really bought in to my philosophy. Like, this is exactly what we want to do. Not only is it beneficial for DMOS for just access points with the relationships that we have, but it's the philosophy of helping these athletes and doing whatever we can with these different scopes of practice and treating just differently than they otherwise do in more of a traditional physical therapy setting that really excited them. So even that day, one of them had mentioned, like, how do we strengthen this partnership? How do we get more involved or bring you guys under our umbrella? And eventually he said, would you even entertain the idea of being acquired? And I didn't think we were going to have that conversation for a long time. So I was like, yeah, of course. And we went down that road. And that took probably a better part of a year, a little over a year, of just constant conversations, trying to work out exactly what that means and what that means for my future. But then along a lot of the lines that we just kind of discussed, it started to be very obvious that it aligned with my new priorities and my goals. And it also enhanced the ability of us to meet that vision of our business goals much quicker.
Sure. No, it's really interesting because there's so many ways you can slice that where they acquire, like I've had people on that have been acquired by private equity or whatnot. A lot of times it's a negative situation where like leadership leaves, you copy and paste in a new person, the whole existing team doesn't like it and they leave, like all that stuff.
Yeah. What
were some of the steps you guys took because you're still operating the business now?
Yep.
You're just owned by Deos.
Yep.
So how did you guys kind of navigate that to make for a smooth transition, but then also still provide really good treatment and value to your patients?
Yeah, that's a great point because that's what really sold me on them. Another clinic actually threw their hat in the ring a little bit late too. And so we were kind of weighing all options. And what really sold me was exactly that. They kind of came in and said, we don't want you to change anything. We're acquiring you not because we need more PT. We just like what you're doing and your philosophy. Keep doing it, but now be on our team. And that's what excited me. And so they allowed me to kind of create systems that would maintain our philosophy. And a lot of it, you can't put everything into a contract. And at the time I was going through something called the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses Program, if you've heard of it.
Was it worth it for you?
It was phenomenal.
Okay.
I loved it.
I've heard a lot of people say that I should apply for it because it changed everything for them.
It did. It really did for me. I loved it. But one of the things is interesting timing because one of the things that they provided was several business coaches essentially. And I ran this by all of them and we troubleshot the whole thing. But what it kept coming down to is like, do you trust these guys? Like, are they decent people? Are they family people? Like, because like I said, you can't put everything into a contract and the things that mattered to me, you can't put in a contract. Are you going to maintain the workflow that is working for us and maintaining like a atmosphere that we've worked really hard to create? An example of that is we don't see quite as many patients as you would traditionally see in another practice. And again, volume is money. And so a lot of practices need to do that. We took a hit and said, we're going to see a few less. At the time, our clinicians were going to make a little bit less. And that was what they were trading for the benefit of being able to see a few less patients and the patients that they're really excited about. I noticed that when I was treating patients that I was excited about, they got the best care, right? If it was just somebody else that needed care, like an adjustment, it didn't light me up and I felt bad, but they weren't getting the best care from me. And so what I found was filling up their schedule with people that excited them really gave us the best opportunity to do great work. And so they were on board with that and they stuck to that. And again, you can't put it in a contract, but they've been very supportive and have just kind of added fuel to a lot of the fire that we've created towards those goals, which has been phenomenal. So yeah, they've left me to run it, and we're doing things very similarly to how we always have. There's been obviously some speed bumps where we have to learn to do things a little bit more corporate, and that's tough. Me specifically, I am the absolute worst with email, and the entire Deos organization is finding that out painfully. But those types of things I'm trying to work around, and it's different. But overall, it helped us take a giant step towards where my vision was, maybe another 20 years.
Sure. Well, and I think it'd be interesting to note too, like what that acquisition looked like. Did they give you a lump sum and then you use that money to do something with it? Mm-hmm. Did they put you guys on salary? Are you just there to run it for 5 years and then you sunset and then you're going to go live on a beach in Tahiti? Like what's kind of what's the structure of that deal look like?
It's funny, man, because again, along those same lines that we've just discussed, their conversations with me was a lot of that. Like, hey, we've seen a lot of these companies get to this point where they get acquired, then the owner wants out and then they sell. And I was very adamant that is not what I'm trying to do. I don't want to leave. Again, I'm kind of obsessed with this.
You're like the Wolf of Wall Street. I'm not fucking leaving.
Exactly.
Microphone in your head.
I wish I would have pulled that, but they were attracted to that. They're like, yeah, we don't see that in you that you're just going to bail on us. We're buying this for you to come on and help us achieve those goals and just pour some gas on that fire. And so that really attracted me. So they gave us a lump sum at the beginning, and then we get a percentage moving forward, which is super helpful and keeps us motivated. And then I took any initial money at the time too. I also owned Big Acai, the acai shop that's also in our location, and I sold that at the same time to our to Griffin, who was our manager at the time. And so I took the money that I've created from selling those companies and bought the building that we're in.
Very cool. Yeah, I think it's an awesome investment then, because then owning the building, that's a prime location, that will continue to appreciate over time. And it's a big move. I think it's a fun thing to see.
Yeah. I feel like it's the best kept secret, like commercial real estate in general. I feel like it's just something that most people feel is just out of reach for them. But I don't think that's true. I think with some actual, some education on it, this thing just feels like a pie in the sky, where I feel like if people actually sit down with somebody that knows what they're talking about and creates a plan to own real estate, it is a cheat code. In such contrast to the business where I pour my heart and soul into, I now own a building that makes money and I don't do anything. And it's just, I think it sets us up for my future, because you can only do that. You can only work that hard for so long, and there has to be a plan there afterwards. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of people get into the gym space specifically without that plan. They have a passion for working out, so they own a gym, and you can't do it forever.
Sure. I think it's a big piece. I know yesterday we had Brittany Todd on, and she's her husband was my JV baseball coach. Cool. Now they live in Decorah, Iowa, and own 6 businesses. They own a coffee shop, an ice cream shop, a bunch of Airbnbs.
Nice.
And same thing. They were saying they bought the real estate for all these commercial buildings. It's hefty. You got to really have a good relationship with your banker to get that kind of capital.
Yeah, it takes some trust.
But that's their retirement plan is the commercial real estate in a thriving community like that. So I think it's a big deal. But what kind of resources did you lean into for some of that stuff to understand how that would even work? Like, how did you have mentors or people, or was it the Goldman Sachs program as well?
Yeah, Goldman Sachs helped a little bit on that, but it was really kind of that program was ending right around the time that I was getting acquired. So I wasn't able to run all my ideas past them or get all my questions answered. They've been very helpful there afterwards. If I ever do have a question or want to meet with them, they've been very open to doing that, which is cool. I leaned heavily into my parents' expertise, where they've owned commercial real estate. And then I have a phenomenal relationship with my banker, like you mentioned. And I went and just spent time with him. He sat me down and helped me run numbers and make sure that this thing cash flows and it is where it has to be. And then just help me make the deal go. I think obviously he's benefiting from it. The bank's benefiting from it in the long run. So they were interested in sitting down and making sure that it worked too. So I have no qualms with asking for help.
That's really cool. Cause I think too, and I don't know how you've set it up, but you could even have the new owner of Big Acai, can pay rent to the business for that. And EP can pay rent to the owner of it. It's there's so many ways you can cut that pie, which is fun. Yeah. I think it's always an interesting
it's
area.
Exactly how it works. I mean, even when I owned it, we were paying rent, and I just kept it the same. We were paying rent, and then obviously when I owned Big Acai, we were paying a lease to my other company, to Engineering Performance.
Sure.
And we just kept those things as exact same. And now they just pay a different LLC that owns the real estate. And so, and again, like, yeah, you have to have a great relationship with your banker and some good trust, but a 10-year lease from a company like Deos says a lot. Like they're pretty stable. They're going to be around. And so that helped a lot.
Do you see yourself doing more commercial real estate to give other businesses kind of an opportunity to get into that?
Yes, I do. I think it's kind of the future for it's my retirement future. It's my plan for the future, where I think it's very passive. It doesn't take the work that I was putting in elsewhere. So it is something that we're very interested in and trying to do more of.
Sure. That's super cool. What was the hardest part of selling your company?
The trusting people that were saying all the right things, and not, again, you can't put in a contract, and just praying that it worked out, because like you said, it was my baby. Like it's not my actual baby, but it was my life's work. And giving that up, especially on a time frame that all of a sudden felt like smashed together. I had mentioned like another clinic had thrown their hat in the ring and offered to make a purchase too, which really poured some heat onto a situation where I had to make a decision pretty quickly. That was really uncomfortable, because it's not like I'm selling something on Marketplace anymore. It's like, it's my whole life. And
like 45, could you do 40?
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't those conversations anymore. It was, do I trust these people with my life's work, everything I put into it, and then my future too. And it's not just my future, right? Obviously it's my wife and my kids, but then at that point I had a team of people that relied on me to make the right decision for them too. And that weighed really, really heavily on me.
Mm. Well, I think the fact that the core reason why you made that decision was your mission. It's to make it better for the athlete. You're going to give them better full circle of care. Like everything. Yeah, right. Yeah. The whole entire conundrum of you're injured or you're getting back to being on the field or you're currently playing, like it solves all these problems, but it also is beneficial to you. And it's also beneficial to your employees. Like it ticks all the boxes. So I think that you made the right decision from what it sounds like. So
you're right. It definitely checked all the boxes. It made my employees, it put them in a better position. It put us in a position, put me and my family in a position where I could take a little bit of a step back from the business and be more of an employee running the business and not have to stress if there's a water line break. And then yes, for the athletes, it made that so much better. So not only are we making a referral and then hoping to God everything goes well, now I'm a phone call away from one of the docs that just, I see a patient, I can immediately call the doctor and we can troubleshoot exactly what's going on next. And it's not a fax,
Sure.
It's no longer a game of telephone. I'm actually talking and partnered with these people. And when they do their notes, when one of the orthopedic surgeons does his notes or urgent injury clinic, I can literally just pull it up and look at it right in our office. And it's no longer this game. So again, back to the mission where I was in high school and just felt like the pressure of the world was on top of me to figure out what I was supposed to do next. Definitely this takes a step towards alleviating that for future people.
How did you said your identity was completely enmeshed with this business. Who's Joey Glenn now? Like, how do you wake up and look in the mirror, and what do you see now versus before you made this big business choice?
Yeah, it's I'm still figuring it out. I'm still figuring it out because so much has changed. But I find that after the acquisition, I'm still incredibly passionate about doing what's best for the athlete and building this program from where it already is. I want to make it more accessible to more people. So it's definitely been more of an expansion effort. But then more than that, I also teach on the weekends some physical therapy modalities, and I'm starting to teach courses that I've written now. And that's what excites me too. I'm also doing some like business consulting for a firm on the East Coast, where I feel like that's kind of the next iteration, is just like trying to take some of the lessons that I've learned, like we've talked about today, and getting that to people that otherwise wouldn't have heard it. So no longer is it like fully focused on solving just like a high school athlete's problem, because I feel like there's systems in place that are doing that really well now. But is there somebody, I can't reach everybody in the country. Is there somebody in Connecticut trying to do that? And they're starting a gym that also has clinic, and they're about to learn some really painful lessons. Mm-hmm. I would really like to get in there and say, here, don't do this, right? And get on the forefront of that. That excites me, and that brings me a lot of I'm passionate about it. It also is pretty time freeing. It doesn't take a whole lot like the physical business did, and that helps me too. So being more involved in just like the upcoming of new entrepreneurs, especially in the gym and clinical athlete space, And then family. I spent a lot more time with my kids. I used to say, like, when we started the business, my kids were like pet rocks, right? Like, they were babies. We kept them alive, and that was, we were doing our job. And now they've got personalities and identities, and my son's super into football and just wants to play sports all the time. Like, I get to be there at all of those. And that's tremendously important to me now.
Sure. That's really cool to see. I think it just gives you a lot more perspective, because if you'd have gone down that path of chasing the money and just pouring yourself into the business so much that you miss it, I always say, like, you can always make your business better, but if you screw your family up, it's kind of hard to undo that.
That's a really good thought.
It's your kids will be in therapy as adults, or your wife will leave you or whatever. It's like you want to have someone to share this success with, and it's a huge piece of everyone. It's like you want to achieve what you want, but have somebody to celebrate it with, right? You don't want to just pour yourself into it so much that you blow it,
It's so true. My daughter is almost 11, and she's at an age now where she's understanding a lot of what is going on in my family too, in my business. And it's fun. I can celebrate that stuff with her. I can come home and say, guess what happened? Or, like, she idolizes a lot of high school athletes that we work with now, and she'll come to EP and see, Tegan, like a softball player is now playing at Texas, and she wants to be her, and she gets to see that. And that's super exciting to me too. That kind of lights me up now too.
Sure. No, I love it. And it's interesting because you'll start to share these things with people. It's like, Dad doesn't have to go to work. Like, I get to go to work. Like, I get to help these people. I get to do this, where some people, it's like work's the devil because it takes you away from everyone. It's like, no, it's like, I get to do this so then we can have a good life. It's like, it's kind of a fun piece of that.
I agree.
Last piece here, I think we've had a really good conversation just to tie it all together. If someone's listening and they are wanting to start a brick and mortar business like what you did, what advice would you have for someone that they've got this passion, this interest, to avoid, like you said, some of the pitfalls you had early on?
Yeah, I would say my best advice is travel. Like, find people that are doing it well and go spend time with them, as much time as you can, and, like, make it worth their while. Like, even if, you're a broke college student, go buy somebody coffee and just ask if you can take them out for coffee, or ask if you take them out for lunch, and pick their brains, because you just don't need to reinvent the wheel, and you have to start from a foundation. And a lot of people have it figured out. And so I think just spending time with people that have done it, or that you want to emulate, or that are running businesses in a way that you want to run a business, is just, it's too powerful. It is everything to me. I think, again, I'm still figuring out where that line is and how to divide my time appropriately so that I feel whole. But I think that's important to at least be conscious of out of the gate, because I wasn't. Being conscious of how much time am I doing this? How important is it to me and my future and my family, and being, like, appropriately allocating your time to make sure that stays consistent to what you've said you believe in.
Love it. Love it. Well, Joey, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. If people want to learn more about EP, or have you come and train their people all over the country, where can they go find more?
Yeah, I mean, our website's ep.Demos.com, and you can get to us there. I had already mentioned I'm terrible at emails, so we'll leave that.
Leave
that out. Don't email me. It'll be a while. But I run our Instagram, which is EP_by Demos, and I can get back to you pretty quickly on there. So if you want to DM us there, that helps tremendously. And yeah, I'd be more than willing to talk to anybody. I feel like I've only gotten to certain any what you might perceive as levels of success by the graciousness of other people, like donating their time and being willing to share their knowledge with me. I'm more than happy to do that with other people. I love that.
Perfect. Well, thanks so much for coming on, man. If you've made it this far on the show, you know what to do. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify, make sure to subscribe. Give us a 5-star rating if you're listening on iTunes, and make sure to check out all of Joey's stuff in the description box below. My name is Ryan Snaadt. It rhymes with odd, and you're listening to Rhymes with Odd. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace. Thank you so much for watching yet another episode of the Rhymes with Odd podcast. We really do appreciate your support. If you could give us a 5-star review on Apple iTunes, that makes a world of difference, guys. Also, if you're tuning in on YouTube or Spotify, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss another episode, and check us out on social media. Also, if you'd like to inquire more about our services here at Snaadt Media Group, or learn about doing your own podcast for your own business, you can find us at snaadmedia.com. We'll see you in the next episode. Peace.